The Thracians stood between the outers of Sparta and their capital. Xanthippus brought with him a good mix of men, but they would not be enough against the might of Greek soldiers. The two armies lined up before one another, one Greek flank protected by a rock formation, the other a forest. As the two armies stared each other down, the militia cavalry sprang into action, starting their rounds of harassment on the flanks, taking down Volksmen and Greek cavalry. It was clear that the Thracians refused to move forward, so the Greeks would have to go to them. They marched forth, stopping only when the archers were in range of the enemy. The archers eagerly fired down on the trouser-wearing barbarians that dared to share their culture. The heavy infantry were quick to fall, and so they moved on to the light cavalry, the remains of the Volksmen scurrying back and forth in an attempt to dodge arrows. The Thracians had had enough of being targets for the Greek arrows and moved forth to engage with the Greek hoplites. Their pikes were much longer than the hoplites' spears, and while they were having some difficulty getting around the Greek shields, it would not matter, for eventually they would get around. So focused on their task, the Thracians failed to spot the hoplites marching into their rear. Long pikes would not save them from the spears digging into their unarmoured behinds. And so, completely surrounded and with only the deaths of a few, the phalanx pikemen broke and ran. The rest of the Thracians lined up before the Greeks, and whether through stupidity or overconfidence, it did not matter. The phalanx pikemen strolled alongside the hoplites, their unshielded sides exposed. The hoplites eagerly took advantage of this display and cut down many of the elite men. The general eventually flings himself into combat, and while the improved armour his bodyguard had gained certainly helped deflect the tips of the hoplites' spears, it most certainly did not improve their overall chances of survival when surrounded by hoplite spears. Xanthippus goes down and the battle was all but won. The cavalry take chase after the fleeing men, Xanthippus among their rank. With minimal losses, Xanthippus was able to march on and besiege the Thracian capital. He orders the construction of 3 siege towers and hires 2 units of Thracian mercenaries to man them. It appeared that the pirates had failed to do their jobs, and Admiral Gnaeus and his cargo of outdated Romans had returned. No matter, if you want something doing, do it yourself. While the invasion force readied itself, the Sicilian agents continued to do good work at sabotaging the various military buildings that populated the island, and no doubt leaving the Romans vastly underprepared for their inevitable doom. During the change of seasons, a new Thracian general had risen through the ranks and had taken command of the small force around Dymas. It was fortunate that Theophrastus was around. The man had some success in taking down barbarians, although it appeared that old age had made the agent sloppy and he loses his life in the attempt to eliminate young blood. Never mind that though, there will be other agents. Xanthippus had a city to conquer. A good mix of troops occupied the city, but as always it would not be enough to defend against the Greeks. A singular siege tower is used and a team of 4 hoplites, 1 archers and a Thracian mercenary tower are put to the side, ready for the advance to the entry point. The battle begins and the siege team march on, the shirtless Thracian mercenaries seemingly not feeling the chill of the air. Reaching the entry point, most of the force peels off, awaiting the opening of the gates before them. The Thracian mercenaries carry on a little further to reach the blind spot in the city walls. They continue their steady march through the snow, making it to the walls unscathed. The tower door opens and the mercenaries flood out onto the walls and make their way for the city gates. A unit of archers stood in their way and they were tougher than anticipated. The 2 forces traded men 1 for 1, both wavering over the loss of their companions. But eventually the mercenaries held out for long enough that the archers break and could be mowed down as the mercenaries made their way for the gatehouse. The hoplites entered the city, the archers not too far behind them, and the mercenaries got to work capturing the towers that stood in the Greeks' way to the centre. The Volksmen are the first to greet the hoplites in the city streets, their efforts to push through the line of hoplites thwarted, and the men are sent running back to the city centre before even one of them had the chance to swing their forks. During the crawl through the city, the Thracian king brings out his bodyguards and attempts to repel the hoplites. The heavy cavalry do a decent job at cutting through the hoplites, and the Thracian leader pushes himself into the middle of the fray, cutting down Greeks left and right. Eventually he lets himself get surrounded, and soon a strike in his back was enough to take him down, and the rest of his men flee back to safety. The Greeks finally made it to the centre of the Thracian capital. The 7 remaining heavy cavalrymen throw away their lives at the end of the hoplites' spears, and the Greeks make short work of the palisades. The hoplites make it onto the plaza and surround the phalanx pikemen. The Thracians fought well, but faced with just under 400 Greeks all around them, they fell until only 1 remained. The hoplites barely noticed the gentle prodding to the back, but with the fight over they turned around and knocked the offending man down, and the city was theirs. Xanthippus enters the city victorious and enslaves the moderately content people. More Gaul stood between Hero and Massilia, but a bridge battle that pulled the force out of the city. Well, only good things could come from that. The Spartans rushed to surround their end of the bridge, the Cretans lined up behind them, but the city army was nowhere to be seen. Armies had been delayed before, but with only one other Gaul unit on the field, surely they would show. Swordsmen stood upon a hill on the other side of the river, looking down upon the Greeks. What did they know that the Greeks didn't? A small force crossed the river to deal with them. Perhaps if they cut enough down, the army of Massilia would arrive. The Cretans did fine work getting arrows behind the large Gaul shields. Hero had had enough waiting for the other army to arrive and crossed the river to deal with the swordsmen that were delaying the Greeks their victory. The Gaul tried charging into the Greek heavy cavalry with little success as they were trying to outrun horses. The Gaul, clearly fixated on Hero, the Greek general loops back around and leads the swordsmen into the ready and waiting Spartans. They soon break and Hero chases and cuts down the final men. An easy victory, yes, but one without the sight of reinforcements. Then, Hero supposes, they'll just have to cut the Gaul down in their own homes. With the diplomat out of the way, Hero besieges the city, building his 3 rams. In southern Italy, Dymas was ready. He loads his army onto a ship and they sail for Sicily and land just north of Syracuse. Spies infiltrate the city, ready for the inevitable invasion that would be occurring soon. The rams were now ready and it was time to take another Gaul city. The Gaul had reinforcements, though not many, and their main army consisted of mostly mercenaries. This would not be a difficult battle at all. 2 rams are deployed to the north and east of the city, and the forces are arranged for a quick entry. As always, the Cretans do an excellent job of clearing the way for the rams, their arrows easily cutting through the skirmisher warband. To the north of the city, a much larger force sought to hold back the Greeks. As the Greek rams made it to the gates, the Gaul reinforcements had arrived from the south, though they did not appear to be in any hurry. The first gate comes down and the Spartans enter the city, their opposition waiting just around the corners. The Spartans to the north soon have their gates busted open and they too enter the city. Hordes of Gaul are quick to charge into the Spartans. Swordsmen are the first to push into the still moving Greeks, but as unready as the Greeks were, the swordsmen stood no chance against the elite men and rout. The barbarian mercenaries would be quick to follow their lead. The Spartans pursue the fleeing men to the centre of the city. Barely missing a step as the brave few Gaul turned back and tried to stop them. But time was running short. The reinforcements had almost made it into the city. The Greek reserves had already fled into the city. The Spartans had the Gaul plaza surrounded. One last push and the city would be theirs. The reinforcements had almost made it into the city and the last few Gaul had almost been cut down. With 40 seconds remaining on the victory clock, the reinforcements made it into the city and the Spartans were moving to block the streets. With 20 seconds to go, the last Spartan stepped off of the plaza, never mind the fact that the Spartans were defending the wrong side of the city. The Spartans repositioned and the countdown had started once more. With 20 seconds to go, the reinforcements had made it to the plaza, the Spartans easily holding them at bay, waiting for the clock to strike 0. What remained of the Gaul broke at the sight of the Spartans, and soon enough the battle was over. With a loss of only 13 men, Massilia belonged to the Greeks. Hero enters the city and exterminates the unhappy peasants. As summer comes to its end, Dymas was attacked while he rested outside of Syracuse. The two armies were of equal strength, but with him Oppius Tullius had brought along the new Roman infantry, as well as some mercenaries. Dymas did not know how well his troops would stand up against these superior Roman units. There was only one way to find out, he supposed. With militia cavalry set on the flanks, Dymas was ready for his first real battle. His line was longer, but the army of Syracuse had arrived on time, and with it onagers. Those could cause some trouble if they got near. The militia cavalry got to work on the Roman flanks, using all means necessary to take out the Roman elite archers. Charging into them and losing a few of their men in the process, the archer auxilia eventually break and flee. On the other side of the line, a unit of militia breaks off to deal with the artillery. The rest of the militia wreak havoc upon the rest of the Roman missile units, and their infantry eventually come into contact with the hoplites. The militia made it to the onager team with no resistance and began firing their javelins down on the artillery crew. Said crew were justifiably unhappy over taking casualties. As the Roman infantry charged into the hoplites, the militia cavalry did fine work in dealing with those who had ran. Having broken the onager crew, the rest of the cavalry joined in with the cleanup of the routers, though the Scipii general appeared to be having none of it, breaking 2 of the militia cavalry in turn. With the flanks suitably cleared, the hoplites moved in to support their comrades. The Roman generals eager to chase down the militia cavalry, going so far as to go behind the Greek line. The nearby hoplites try to catch the heavy cavalry, but don't make it in time. The general catches up with the missile cavalry and tears through them while the hoplites steadily approach. In the meantime, some of the Roman infantry had regained their confidence and came charging back into the fight. Dymas made moves to flank these troops. Having finished harassing the militia cavalry, the Roman general moved on to the archers and rears of hoplites. The hoplites were quick to turn around and try and stop the Romans' rampage. The general once more slips away, content with chasing down the archers. Militia cavalry who had rejoined the fight tried to stop him. Back with the battle line, the second Roman general had held back for a majority of the battle, but had decided now was the time to attempt flanking. He gets caught in a web of hoplites, spears, and with Dymas quickly approaching in the rear. The general tries to flee, but the hoplites do not give him that courtesy. Now only one more general remained. Publius Scipio had been a very slippery man up to this point, but hoplites now almost surrounded him. Surely he could not get away this time. Publius gets away, the cavalry unable to catch up with the retreating general. Dymas got to work reducing the number of Romans that would retreat into Syracuse. With the final men of Praetorian cohort going down, Dymas wins his first solo battle with some heavy losses. He loses 1,000 of his own men, but the Romans only had 150 of theirs remaining.
Victory and honor!
On the dawn of the winter of 231 BC, Teleus joins Teleos in the afterlife, and a new grandson of Sparta is born. While he was severely battered and bruised, Dymas was ready to besiege Syracuse. He gathered his force and attacked the city. The spies had done good work, the gates were open. The city was barely defended and Dymas would be able to retrain his men. He decides to forego the siege towers for charging directly through the gates. Hoplites are positioned around the city at each open gate. The battle begins and the hoplites rush to the gate with the least resistance, the gate with what remained of the onagers. A handful of hoplites fall on the way to the city. The two opposing forces collide and the artillery crew of 5 don't last long against the Greeks. With the Romans out of the way, the gates are claimed by the Greeks and the hoplites and archers congregate around the plaza. The archers draw the Scipii general off of the plaza and into the awaiting hoplites, Publius Scipio himself taking the lead in the engagement. The heavy cavalry did well cutting down the hoplites, but they would not be able to defeat them all before they themselves fall. The Auxilia came to help their general, surrounding the hoplites on the flanks and turning their attention off the Roman general. The Greeks' numbers were steadily falling under the onslaught of the new Roman troops, but finally, after a long slogging match between the two armies, the general falls to his death, and with him goes his army's morale. The Auxilia never made it back to the plaza, and all that remained were 57 legionary cohort. They too do not last long against the Greeks. Dymas loses 200 men and gains one of the 3 remaining Roman cities, as well as it being an ex-Greek city that rebelled long ago. Dymas occupies the city and exterminates the clearly very unhappy population. His troops retrained and refreshed, Xanthippus continues on his crusade, moving north for the remaining Thracian city. The spy finishes the journey to the new capital and infiltrates her walls. In northern Italy, a Dacian army is hanging around the border, and by now it is well known that those who hang around the border have no good intentions. The summer of 230 BC draws to a close and the Gaul harass the Greek fleets. To the surprise of no one, Batavium is besieged by the Dacians, though not with the army that was expected, and Xanthippus is once more attacked by the Thracians along the way. Mucos had already failed against one Greek army. What chances did he think he had against this one, especially fielding that many mercenaries? In fact, in the interim, he had become the faction leader. This would be an interesting battle indeed. There was no beauty to this battle, it was visceral and ugly. The militia cavalry got to work on the flanks and the Thracians had charged right into the Greek line. Mucos and some phalanx pikemen successfully pushing through the centre, but with such few Thracians, the Greek flanks were able to sweep inwards. Xanthippus charged after Mucos but got pulled into combat with phalanx pikemen. The Thracian king got himself sandwiched between several hoplites and meets his end being flung from his steed. With the death of their king, the Thracians lose the will to fight and they run from the battlefield, and the cavalry take chase. Phalanx pikemen that had once been difficult for the cavalry to cut down fall with ease beneath Xanthippus' sword. Until finally every Thracian man had left the battlefield one way or another. He loses just under 200 men, which wasn't too bad. The pirates send their congratulations via defeating yet another Greek fleet. The official declaration of war with the Dacians is given, and it appeared that they had brought a decent mix of units. It was rather fortunate that Amnestos was there building up his own force ready for taking on the Dacians. It appeared that they would be coming to him rather than the other way round. Dymas' army was refreshed and retrained, and it was time for him to move on to the next city. With peasants filling in for his absence and the population put aside for training, Dymas marches north to Messana and puts her under siege, building 3 siege towers. On the mainland, an abandoned Scipii army that had to that point remained just stood in a field was on the move and had stopped at the walls of Capua. Amnestos' old moving army still had residence there and could easily handle the stray army. Xanthippus finishes his journey to Campus Girti and besieges the city with 3 siege towers. And with 2 spies in the city, there was every chance that the gates would be open on his arrival. Back in Batavium, with 2-to-1 odds in his favour, Amnestos sets off to defend yet another city from its foes. With the Dacians moved away, the militia could come out to play. The archers were positioned on the walls and were able to fire off the occasional volley at the passing barbarians. The Dacians lined themselves away from the city walls, and while the militia worked their way around to the backs, the hoplites and archers made their way out of the city. A unit of militia ran for the woods, intending to hide for the perfect ambush. Before they could hide themselves amongst the trees, the Dacians sent their archers down to deal with the cavalry. Though it appeared the cavalry's ability to hide was too good and the archers turned back, not wanting to miss this opportunity of weakness, the militia sprung from the trees and charged into the tired archer warband. They lose almost 30 horsemen, but they break the archers. The second group of archer warband came rushing over in support, and the militia moved straight onto them, barely spending any time with the warband before they too broke. The rest of the army marches forth until the archers were in range. The militia cavalry recklessly charge into the rear of the Dacians' front line. They lose heavy numbers, but they do their job and easily break the will of the Dacians. And with that, the barbarians call for retreat. The remaining cavalry, including Amnestos, chase down the fleeing men. A fair few make it off the battlefield, and some even almost make it. And eventually there are no more Dacians on the map. 1,300 kills, with most of the work done by the militia cavalry. Impressive. Amnestos continues to improve, gaining a veteran warrior in his retinue. To the west, a diplomat tries to broker peace with the Gaul. We had no more need to quarrel with their people. The Greeks had greater plans for elsewhere. But of course, the Gaul think that peace is a joke. Hero makes to leave the valley, having secured Massilia as much as he could. But in the summer of 229 BC, while attacking a stray Scipii fleet, a large Gaul force was spotted advancing from Massilia, and so Hero returned to defend the city he had just worked on capturing, placing himself at the end of a rather convenient bridge. Capua, it seemed, was not the Romans' target. Rome indeed would be much more fitting, and so everything that wasn't peasants was moved from Capua to Rome. Hi there guys, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like or even subscribe to see more content like this. The channel now has a Twitter account, so if you would like to see bits and pieces of behind the scenes content and other fun little things, follow me at Galaxy Links Games. Thank you all again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!